And now we get to the part of the show where we discuss Wimbledon and kind of, I guess the best way to describe the way I'm thinking about this is why it gives us the feels that it gives us. It's just, it's so perfect. Everything about it in my mind is perfect. The courts, when you walk in and they haven't been played on, they're mowed a certain way. They smell a certain way. You see the same people working at the tournament because they're members of the club. You feel that, and not in a stuffy way, in like a welcome to our home, welcome to our living room type of way. And oh, by the way, we're going to play the biggest tournament in tennis also. I just fell in love with it very, very quickly. I absolutely love it there. I think my favorite day of the year would be the first day that you get to Wimbledon. And I always kind of played pretty well at Queen's. And so I would always consciously stay in central London for Queen's because I wanted them to feel like separate events. Most players, when they get to Wimbledon, they rent houses and you're all around Wimbledon Village. And I could do 30 minutes only on Wimbledon Village being the best place on earth. I wanted it to feel separate, and I wanted to feel like moving day on that Monday where we're going to Wimbledon, that excitement, that buzz. I didn't want to burn those feelings during Queen's. I wanted them to feel like a very, very distinct change. Other people did it differently. Leighton Hewitt would also, he also won Queen's 4 times. He would rent the house out at Wimbledon and drive back and forth to Queen's. So from central London with no traffic, I don't even want to know why people say that because there's always traffic there. About a half hour, 45 minutes outside of London with traffic. Who knows? It could be an hour and a half. Just take the tube. It's easier. But it's just magic. The traditions, the players, the winners, the rules they have, but then someone telling you a rule in a very friendly tone. Like I got called in to I used to call it the principal's office. It was Alan Mills, God rest his soul, one of my favorite people who was the tournament referee forever. Reebok had made me some shoes. There was too much black on them. And I was like, I got nothing. Like I can put white out on them and I can adjust it. That probably won't look as good. And he goes, what did he say? He always had an amazing way of putting stuff. And he would call me in and like, he kind of had this, smirk that, I think he knew that I could take a joke. And he goes, well, contrary to popular belief, we're not completely irrational. Just don't do it next year. I was like, I love you so much. You're the best. Like, it's that type of thing. And I think people view it as this like, stuffy place. It's just, they have these traditions and I never felt intimidated by them. It felt like a warm hug to me. I always thought it was cool. How do you feel when you walk through there, JW?
Did you just say this was the greatest sports venue in the world?
Yeah, I did.
You said that very cavalierly.
No,
but you said you said that, and I'm like, oh shit. Well, what could top that? And I'm like, you know what? I don't know if you. I think that's a defensible position.
Yeah, and maybe you like the Masters, or maybe you like Lambeau Field, or maybe you like Wrigley Field, or maybe you like a soccer stadium that I've never been to, but there's no way you can definitively think what I'm saying is nuts. In a world where apparently everything I say can be considered nuts, that can't be considered nuts, even if you don't agree with me. I fully believe it.
I'm tired of your Churchill Downs disparagement. No, I think you're totally right. And I think one of my hot takes on Wimbledon is that, I mean, it's tremendous. Again, nobody goes to Wimbledon and says, people go to the Indy 500 and they say, okay, I can check that off my list. And now my ears are ringing and I smell like smoke and I don't need to do that again. Nobody goes to Wimbledon and says, nah, didn't live up to the hype. But can you name me another property that passes up more money in revenue, right? So there's no naming rights. There's no McLaren on center court. There's no crazy secondary ticketing market where, I mean, they pass up so much revenue prioritizing tradition. And I feel like that makes it more valuable. So the fact that it is not the Barclays Bank center court, I'm sure they could get $25 million a year if center court were sponsored. Easy. I'm sure courtside signage. I'm sure letting you wear your black shoes But I feel like it's almost more valuable because of the money they pass up. And it also sort of weirdly, you mentioned the Masters, or we talk about some of these sort of elegant events, and it's weirdly populist. Like you can wait in line in a queue and spend 29 pounds, which is whatever, $40, and sit 2 rows back of Roger Federer. I mean, it's very elegant and tasteful, but there's also this kind of rowdy, open to the public. Everyone that wants to watch tennis should be able to. They have a great program where you can leave your ticket on the way out, so somebody that waits in line can then take it and take your spot. It's weirdly not elitist. It's in the old version of populist, in the pre-2016 version of populist. It's weirdly a people's event for all the elegance. I also love the three. At one point, I think there were 3 signs, and it was the brand of the tennis ball. It was Rolex had some deal, and they had the official clock, and it was something called Robinson's barley water. I don't know what barley water quite is.
It's we finally got to one of the parts of Wimbledon that isn't great. Robinson sucks.
All right, but
they're not. Mike, I'm sorry. They're not going to sponsor. Like I would rather. I mean, the fact that like if you gave me, like Olipop is obviously fantastic. If you gave me an Olipop and you put it outside and filled half of it with lake water, I would still drink it over Robinson's.
It's someone said it was like what you take before your. Have you had a colonoscopy yet? Have you had a colonoscopy yet?
No, I was actually going to make that the next episode.
So no, but you look at the U.S. Open, right? And you get these emails sometimes, and they say, we have a special, non-alcoholic craft beer sponsorship category. It's the official tequila of the U.S. Open. The players, it's hot, and all of a sudden, out come the Continental Airlines umbrellas, and they're about 80,000 pieces of signage and brands. It's just a different way to run an event, but. Wimbledon, for all it's sort of, everyone thinks it's snooty and it's elegant and it's tradition. It's actually a really cool people's event. I think the grass is part of it. I think the fact that I think what you said is really interesting. There are a lot of rules, but they're not obnoxious. They're just you sort of go with the tradition, but you're not considered like a Philistine if you run afoul of something. It's sort of the perfect distance from London, where it feels like you're in the English countryside, but you say it's 25 minutes on the tube if you have to get to Hyde Park. The fact that, I mean, I'm curious, just talk more about your experience as a player, because you're not there as someone who's made a bucket list trip. You're there to do work. What do you think differentiates it most from your run-of-the-mill event, as someone who's actually there to work and not there because they're a fan?
For me, it was like, so some of this is based in nostalgia and memory for me. I remember, for me, it was a tradition watching stateside. It was breakfast at Wimbledon, and it was always a massive deal in our house. It was even 7 years old. I understood it. I got the gravity of it. I knew the champions that had won it. I completely bought in on the history of it. And it's a weird thing because my relationship with Wimbledon ended up being a fantastic one. Like I think I probably got along more with the fans there than I did in New York sometimes, right? Like and on paper it shouldn't have worked, right? You got the brash American who breaks stuff and yells at people and wears his hat backwards sometimes, and it was an unlikely relationship that ended up being so positive. And all I wanted, was that. But for me,
can I ask you a question before we go further, and you can confirm or deny this or cut it out?
Sure.
Were you invited to be a member despite not having won the title? Did I hear that right?
Yeah. Yes, I was. Yeah, shockingly. So the rule is, for those who don't know, if you win Wimbledon, you become a member of the All England Club. So people think like, Wimbledon is the tournament and that's how it exists. The All England Lawn and Tennis Club is a year-round club that people use like a sports club, and it just happens to you play Wimbledon there. So like similar to the Masters is the tournament and Augusta National is the club, Wimbledon is the tournament, and All England Club is the host. They host Wimbledon. If you win, you become a member forever, and so that's kind of the way it works. You win, you're in. You don't, you're not. And so I lifelong dream, I would have loved to have been a member there. Obviously you win the tournament, you come close, and it doesn't quite happen. And So I got a call in, I remember I was staying at Fish's house in LA, actually. I don't know why we were out there, but we were out there and I had a call. I think Tim Henman texted me and said, Phil Brooks would like to talk to you, who was the chairman of the All England Club at the time. And said he'd like to talk to you, just tournament and whatever. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool because I'm now close enough to the game. I think I had been out of it a year and a half, maybe. I think it was about then. It was early 2014. And so I was like, oh, he's probably going to ask me surfaces, locker rooms, player experience. I'm not biased anymore. He knows that I absolutely love this tournament and this venue. I was certainly never shy about telling that to anyone. And so I get on the phone. I was like, okay, random phone call, but I think I could probably add value. It wasn't crazy to think that he would call and want some time. And he asked if I would like to be. No, he asked, what was it? Would you be offended? He was sensitive to the fact that I hadn't won it, obviously, and he basically, in spite of tradition, would you consider being a member of the All England Club and All England Lawn Tennis Club? And I was stunned. One of the happiest moments of my life. Like, I was absolutely stunned. It's not something I use enough. It still hurts to go there sometimes. I'm gonna go there casually, just as a member, to hit some balls in late August, which will be great. But yeah, and I started learning that I developed a really good friendship with so like the locker room, the head locker room attendant during Wimbledon in the champions locker room, which the seated players can use. There's a friend of mine named Doug, and he's this English guy who was into baseball scores, and so we'd come in, I'd talk about my fantasy team, we'd bullshit, I'd hit putts, rain delays, for 3 weeks every year, we would ham it up, and I just really enjoyed him. He became a good friend of mine. And I learned after the fact that he really pushed that for me, kind of from the inside. And so you never know who's watching. You never think that, Doug is going to be able to push you, in that direction. And so I was pretty humbled. I was even more humbled when I found out it was not from him, because I don't think he had the decision-making power, but apparently he had voiced his support, which was really nice for me, because he's the one who's looking at players when there are no cameras, right? And he kind of sees the balls and strikes of it. So I was pretty honored. I don't know that my life would be much different if I wasn't, frankly, but I sure as hell am happy and honored that I am, and it's still weird to me that I could jump on a plane and go there and hit balls anytime. But it's it's certainly a place that, it's pretty nice to walk through. If you see any of your analysts when you're watching with a pin on their jacket, like a Wimbledon pin, that's a member's pin. So they are members. So it's a pretty cool thing.
A great story. And just how cool is it, but also how nicely does it speak of Wimbledon, that the fact that the locker room attendant lobbied for you clearly had some heft and some weight.
Yeah.
Great story. I hope you make more use of it.
Yeah, me too. And also I got to say, someone else who was like the ultimate gentleman throughout that whole process was Tim Henman. Obviously a member, has a big, voice in the room there. However many times semifinalist. He was great about walking me through, the protocols, and I knew it for a long time. And then I played an event at Royal Albert Hall where all of a sudden it was made public later that year, in the fall, while I was over there. And so I got to take Brooke, my wife, there to, have a meal with the chairman and walk her. So the walk that I had made a million times from the locker room to center court, where you're walking through a club. It's not like an arena like the US Open where you're underneath kind of, the underbelly of the stadium and concrete and this and that. And she got to see, like, I got to walk that, like the walk that you do when you play in a final, where, the famous quote, "The doors open." We got to make that walk together, which was really cool. And I think it was a cool experience for her to see as well. I love that day. I hope to do it more. I think hopefully as my kids start understanding it a little bit more, they'll think it's as cool as I do.
Do you pay dues?
I don't know.
All right. So the reason I don't want to spend too much on
I
that,
don't know.
but
I really
apparently
don't know.
no, but in keeping with our theme about how cool this place is, the
Yeah.
dudes are like less than my YMCA. I mean, the
Yeah.
dudes,
Yeah. I mean, the
I
fact
mean,
that I
like,
don't know means that if I am paying him,
yeah,
that it's not
exactly.
really causing me much stress.
I think people don't realize that you're right. They use this as a club year round. So the interview room, which is quite nice, in November, that's where they're going to show whatever Billy Madison. That's like the movie night for the club. You sort of forget that like Mrs. Nussbaum plays doubles on court 18 a few days after the tournament's over. That's a great story. I'd never heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I think there's two other, if I'm in, gosh, I hope I don't get this wrong, but I'm 99% sure I'm right and we can edit it. If not, so you'll never hear it if I'm wrong. Two other players, Ken Rosewall and Lendl, were invited to join the club, even though they didn't win the singles. I think that's right. Anyways, so that's Wimbledon. I think I kind of flirted with it and then didn't do it. My single favorite day of the year is the first practice day. So as the tournament's going on, the grounds are heaving. There's Henman Hill. You walk through the outer courts. You can just walk up to most of them. Like there's a side with stands, and then there's like between courts you can walk between them and just kind of hang out between and check out the matches. It's like equal parts the most perfect place you've ever seen, and then it's like a tennis festival in some parts where you can hang out on the hill and watch the big screen. And they just the way that they are able to balance tradition with, I don't know, experience where you don't feel uptight when you're there. And maybe my experience isn't everyone's experience, but that's always the way I felt. Like you can buy a grounds pass, go to Henman Hill, have a day at Wimbledon, see the entire venue. Like you're watching the screen outside of court one, you look, 45 degrees to your right and you see the shape of center court. It's just so cool. And so the first day you get there for practice, you normally get an hour if you're a seated player to hit on site, and then over at Arangi Park, which by the way, another nice touch, to hit at Arangi Park, you don't have to wear all whites. So all of your warm-ups, all your practice sessions, it's not as if you're, taking your starchy whites out to go warm up for a match. So again, a touch that they get perfectly right. Arangi Park is, basically a big row of grass, and they're all together. There's no space between them, and that's where the players warm up, practice, everything else. But during the tournament, to get from our locker rooms are kind of in center court, right? So like second level center court, you walk down this long staircase, a couple of flights, and all of a sudden you walk underneath all of Wimbledon. So there's 30,000 people up above you, a floor above you. You're walking underneath them to Arangi Park through, the kitchen doors open up when you're walking, like it's where all the, deliveries are, the infrastructure, 18-wheelers parked down there. That's how they get the whole thing. And there's, the players can walk down below there, and then you walk up the stairs, and there's tons of fans hanging over the entrance to Arangi Park when you're coming from underground. And it's so much fun because you'll be practicing on like court one right there, one of the first couple courts where the public can watch practice. It's so cool. But then you'll hear the fans just start going nuts, like it's like the Beatles, and you'll be like, Serena! And that first fan who sees the person who's walking up, and then all the fans just start going crazy. It's like this tell, because all of a sudden you're underground and you peek up, and all of a sudden your face is showing, and you look up and you just see the sea of people kind of leaning over the railings, just going crazy. So it's weird because you have this, like the traditional space of center court where there's decorum, tradition, and then you go to Arangi Park, and it's the Beatles, right? It is the seeing your favorite players up close. You have to walk directly in between all of the fans, like you're on a staircase, and they're on both sides, and you're walking right through, high-fiving, doing the whole thing. So that's during the tournament. Before the tournament, I'm a pretty quick walker. I'm a fidgety person. I can focus on something for about 4 seconds. The walk from outside of center court, where you walk down where the public will be 5 or 6 days from then, the slowest walk through Wimbledon when there's not anyone on site. There's not a person there besides the players, and players alone can't fill that place. It can't make it feel full. That slow walk through Wimbledon, past Henman Hill, past the video board, over to Orangi Park, just casually walking into Orangi Park, and you know that feeling is going to go away and be replaced by something that's magic also. 5 or 6 days later is just maybe the best walk in all of tennis. And I say that with respect to walking out through the clubhouse for the finals, which is also, I could talk for a half hour about how special that is. But it's just amazing. They get so many of the notes right. It's the place of my biggest heartbreak in this sport. And it simultaneously makes my heart full every time I think about it.
It's, I think we ought to do a special episode on more behind the scenes. This is great. I've been there a million times, but I haven't heard half this. It's like you're describing like half opera, half minor league baseball game.
I guess that's right. Producer Mike.
I was just going to ask about the dress code. Can you talk about the history behind the kind of all whites? Like why? It's just always been that way, huh?
It never bothered me, so never really thought to ask why. Like I just kind of liked it. I know there was some, Andre didn't like it at first, and I'm sure he came around after he won in '92. He literally wouldn't go play there a couple of times because he was anti-dress code and he was the rebel. And they even won, he won them over, and, Wimbledon won him over. I know he speaks with reverence about it now. I just, most of the time, and I've said it on this podcast before, doing something just because that's the way it always been done, I think is normally dumb. And in Wimbledon, it's just perfect to me. It's just, I don't know why.
What did Alan Mills say to you, though? Because I think there's something there, too. They're not unreasonable. So there was a tradition of having that open Sunday, and now there no longer is. And they've made some concessions, especially understandably to female players about all white. They've bent a little bit on that. And I think the players, the players wear different shoes, and the players give a little, and I think the club gives a little too. And it's actually a very nice kind of meeting of reasonable people. I got to bounce. You know what this means? It means I'm going to have to wait till next time to congratulate you on the Serving Up Dreams Award you're going to get the first night of the U.S. Open. I got to jump on this other call. Shit.
This sounds like a good time for you. Just sign off. Like, do we run a show now, Producer Mike, where people just just fucking leave whenever they want?
See you later,
pleasure, guys.
Yeah, all right, John. Cool. Big gulps, huh? Well, see you later.
And there he goes.
Jeez, and then he's gone. Like, I mean, I'd question his work ethic if he didn't work 16 hours a day.
To button up the white thing, I just Googled it real quick. A lot of people allude to the fact that in the 1880s, when the rules were written, it was because it was so people didn't sweat to death, because it was unseemly to see the sweat stains. But also, they were probably playing in like wool. It's probably the cooler way to play.
It's horrible.
It was all whites, but I think it looks pretty good. I like it too.
I think it's awesome. And over time, to John's point, like it used to be all white, and then they would like allow a little stripe, and then they would allow a little. So it's almost like a bend don't break defense on on everything. Anyways, I love Wimbledon. Someone else who loved Wimbledon right in my face, oftentimes, one Roger Federer. Lost to him in 3 finals. He won it a million times. Something that's interesting about this podcast, and I'll say this and then we'll go to break, is that Producer Mike, Social Sophie, before this podcast, it's funny because we're watching like tennis fandom expand in real time, right? To where like, Mike now knows how to say Laver Cup, which is cool.
Maybe.
Which is, well, whether or not he does it, he knows the right way to say it now. But Social Sophie on the other side of this break, back with another movie review. She did Challengers. She watched the Roger Federer documentary. We have not talked about it. We kind of have the framework and skeleton of a show when we write it, but we always want the first conversation to actually be when we've pressed record. So 99% of the things you hear are the first time that we have talked about it with the group. Social Sophie back on the other side to review the Roger Federer documentary. Dun, dun, dun. We'll be right back.